news, there's uncertainty over the future of Gaza the day after a huge breakthrough which saw Israeli hostages and Palestinian prisoners and detainees released in a ceasefire agreement. There are reports of Hamas gunmen carrying out executions, and the Palestinian Civil Defence has told the BBC that 7 people were killed by Israeli forces in 2 separate incidents in the Gaza Strip. Well, Israel has now confirmed the identity of 4 bodies of hostages that were handed over yesterday. Meanwhile, the scale of damage in Gaza is becoming clearer. The United Nations Development Team estimates that more than 80% of all buildings in the Strip have been destroyed or damaged. These are some of the latest drone images. Well, a warning that this report from our Middle East correspondent Yolande Knell contains upsetting images.
Hailing the start of a golden age, President Trump ended a remarkable day trip in the Middle East, but his peace plan is short on key details.
What's the road ahead for governing Gaza? Because
a lot of people like the one-state solution, some people like the two-state solutions. We'll have to see.
But now, far from disarming and giving up power as the plan demands, Hamas is asserting its authority over Gaza's ruins. Today, this was a deadly shootout with its rivals in an armed gang. Earlier, others were executed by Hamas gunmen in this verified video. Since the ceasefire, there's been a promised surge in vital aid getting into the Strip: food, medicines, tents and fuel. UN workers have rushed to restore water supplies for people returning to Gaza City.
They want to begin that long process of rebuilding and restarting their lives, but to do that they need water. Everywhere we went yesterday, driving around, assessing the situation and meeting families, people were doing that universal sign for please give me a drink.
The UN says 80% of all buildings in Gaza are destroyed or damaged, over 90% in Gaza City. For 2 million Palestinians living here, the stakes could not be higher, and many are desperately hoping that crucial talks will soon start on the next steps for peace.
I support any effort that leads to security and stability and revives the economy, just to give people comfort. Any effort, even if it is a small hope, God willing, it will grow in the future, because we are exhausted and we want to raise our children.
But there's so much that can derail this deal. Israelis accuse Hamas of breaking the initial agreement after it sent back the bodies of only 4 deceased hostages instead of all 28.
It's like the soul been taken as well from us as families. We've been kidnapped as families. So that's why this closure is so important. We cannot pass into the path of rebuilding Gaza, going to phase 2, phase 3 in the Trump framework until we have all our beloved ones back.
Now, with the US president back at the White House, there's a danger that his attention moves on, just as crucial decisions must be made for any real chance of peace in the Middle East. Yolande Knell, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Well, let's speak live to the former UK ambassador to Qatar and Iran and the Director General of the Middle East Association, Nicholas Hopton. And Nicholas, thank you so much for being with us. Just walk me through the critical questions that need to be answered next here.
I think yesterday's meeting, summit meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh, a celebration of the ceasefire agreement and the release of those hostages still alive, and obviously the address given by President Trump to Knesset, the Israeli parliament, that seems already in the past. Today, I think the full challenge and the complexity of the implementation of the peace achieved in these negotiations and agreement, that challenge is coming into stark relief. And we've heard the figures from the UN about the extraordinary extent of destruction of homes in the Gaza Strip, and 92% apparently in Gaza City itself. The challenges facing the population as they try and return to their homes and rebuild their lives, no water, desperate need for humanitarian support. This is the story we're going to be focusing on, I think, increasingly as we go forward. And it is the right story to be focusing on, because unless humanitarian support is delivered very quickly, and unless the international community step up rapidly to fill the security void left behind by the Israeli Defense Forces withdrawal, I think the situation could get worse before it gets better.
We're looking, as you're speaking, at the latest drone footage, exactly what you were referring to. It is a staggering sight from the air, just the scale of the damage and the destruction. So 2 questions to you as we watch these pictures. How quickly does a stabilisation force need to be in place on the ground? And when we talk of a transitional administration and potentially the involvement of Tony Blair and others, that is controversial. How do you see it?
I think the urgency to get humanitarian assistance in is very clear from your report just now. And I'm glad to say that the British government, along with some other countries from the region, but also Europe, is holding a 3-day conference in the UK at the moment, focusing immediately on that need to support the rebuilding and the reform of the Palestinian Authority. What does that mean? How is it best done? That is very urgent, but also getting some security in the area vacated by the Israeli Defense Forces. We've heard of extrajudicial killings, Hamas reasserting itself. There is talk of some Arab countries being ready to step up, provide troops, boots on the ground. This can't happen quick enough. Otherwise, chaos will ensue, and it may already be an anarchic situation on the ground. So the challenge is immediate, and the international community cannot afford just to sit back, having achieved a ceasefire agreement. Let us hope that President Trump and other international leaders remain very focused on what needs to be done, because their leadership, which has been vital, needs to continue.
2 final questions. The first, how do you stop the deal unravelling very quickly, say, with all of the bodies of the dead hostages not being handed over or Hamas not disarming?
I think, again, this comes back to continued exerted international leadership and presence. President Trump, as we know, has returned to the United States. But the regional leaders must also now play a strong role in providing their support to the Palestinian people. And within Israel, I think the government of Prime Minister Netanyahu must ensure that their remaining hostages are returned home, but by peaceful means. And obviously the bodies, Hamas say that many of those bodies, they can't locate them within Gaza. This is appalling. It's not improbable, but it's an appalling reality. So I think there's a lot of responsibility, and the international community, the UN, organizations like the Halo Trust, which disarm and remove mines and ordnance from conflict zones, all have a role to play in stabilizing the situation and bringing a vestige of stability, which can then be used to build on for the next phase.
A brief final thought then, because those are concerns in the immediate future. In terms of wider issues, Israeli settlers continue to actually take Palestinian land. You have that whole issue of a 2-state solution. All of those issues are going to have to be resolved, aren't they?
Absolutely, and I think it's notable that the agreement, the ceasefire peace agreement, doesn't deal with these issues in detail. There's a lot of questions still to be answered, and the leaders leaving Sharm el-Sheikh yesterday recognize that, and I think they need to flesh out those points as soon as possible. There's a question about governance, a question about transition, disarmament of Hamas. Not clear how that's going to happen, and as we can see already, they are reasserting their presence. And also questions about how far back will the Israeli forces withdraw, and how do we see proper, meaningful negotiations which will lead to a sovereign state for the Palestinians and stability in the region in the long term. When and how will those negotiations start? This all calls for continued vigilance and engagement from the international leadership who have made the ceasefire possible.
Nicholas Hopton, we have to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us, giving us those thoughts, that analysis. Thanks so much for your time.